Dante. My name is Jennifer Gill, and I am the Director of Global Product Marketing at Zerto. And today we're going to have a fantastic panel discussion about disaster recovery as a service. And we're going to hear from them how you can get up and running really quick, maybe even 60 minutes to a new DR strategy. One thing I want to point out before we move on from the first slide is we are going to take questions throughout the webinar. So in the panel that popped up for me on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see there's a questions tab. Please take the time to enter in questions. We'll take as many as we can right up until the end of the hour. So for the agenda today, we're going to go through some panel introductions and some background. So one thing I think that's funny is when I talk to people, they say, well, we don't need DR. And I'm going to show you that, yeah, you kind of do. And then how you know which applications need disaster recovery. What's the best way to evaluate them? A few questions that we had that we thought, based on the panel, they had heard from their customers and we thought would be helpful to share with all of you. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we will be taking your questions. So we have Dante Orsini, who is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at iland. He has over 20 years of experience across managed services, technical consulting fields, and he's regarded as a thought leader in information technology. And of course, he's a Zerto partner, having that great thought leadership. He holds a seat on the VMware Service Provider Advisory Council and also works closely with Cisco. So Dante, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And we also have Jeff Biggs, Executive Vice President of Technology Operations at Peak 10. Jeff also has more than 20 years of experience in technology and internet management experiences. So at Peak 10, he has quite a vast range of responsibilities, including the strategy and design and management of their cloud and their information systems. Before Peak 10, he was at Voibix Corporation and held numerous strategic leadership positions. And you can see that Jeff is a graduate of the Wright State University School of Engineering. Jeff, thank you so much for being here today.
You bet, thank you.
Okay, and then from across the small pond, we have Kevin Linzel, who's Director of Strategy and Architecture at Adapt. He has over 20 years of experience in telecommunications, managed services, and IT sectors. He's worked in support, managed service product development, sales, and Office of the CTO roles. He delivers the strategy and services roadmap at Adapt and is involved in managing all aspects of the productization of services. So leveraging partnerships with EMC and others, he worked to be first to market in the software-defined data center, the Habitat. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, thanks very much.
And then Jordan Jacobs is Vice President of Products at SingleHop. He has more than 10 years of business strategy and product development experience in cloud, cloud hosting, and managed services. In his current role, he oversees all services through the product lifecycle, from conceptualization all the way to market. He's very technical with a great business aptitude, which serves him well in his role as Vice President of Products. Jordan, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay, so if we look at what causes disasters, so what I find really interesting at trade shows is I'll talk to someone and say, hey, what are you doing for disaster recovery? And they say things like, well, we don't have hurricanes, and we don't get flooding, we don't have any kind of severe weather. And at Zerto, we found that kind of interesting and thought, you know, well, what causes disasters? So we conducted a survey of our customers, and if you'll look, you'll see not a whole lot of weather-related incidents here. So hardware, everyone kind of has hardware in their environment, so that can fail and cause a disaster. Power loss or interruption, even something like upgrading, if it's not done correctly, can affect the infrastructure and then therefore the business. So Dante, when we were talking a little bit about this on Tuesday, you had mentioned that you see a wide range of disasters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to your point, Jennifer, it's rarely the big things that make news that cause the challenges, right? I mean, we actually did a study as well last year And one of the fastest growing threats that we've seen is actually coming from security. So while weather usually takes the headlines, recently you're seeing a lot of headlines around people being compromised. But far and away, I think you're spot on here. Trying to mitigate against power loss and other human effects is usually the part that really will catch people, right? So making sure that people have a sound strategy that's going to cover them all these bases I think is the key.
And Jordan, you had mentioned something as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. As soon as you kind of put together a cohesive, well-designed DR strategy, you start to look at your business differently. In the data center engineering world, if we see a massive storm or potential issues with the grid, we may transition to generators and run on generators, and using kind of the grid as our backup. And as you start to really develop your DR strategy, things like software install upgrade problems are definitely something that you worry about and you might fail over because of. But you also might choose to actually fail over ahead of time while you perform the upgrade. And so what you do is you kind of stop being stuck on a single location. You take a small maintenance window, a few minutes, move over, and then you can really run your infrastructure in this kind of remote site at 100% operation while you perform whatever upgrade. So I think the point I really wanted to make is it's not just disasters that cause you to kind of use your disasters that happen to cause you to use your DR site, but it's actually preventative issues as well.
Jennifer, I think we lost you for a second here.
Oh, yes, you did. I went. So, Jeff, you had mentioned around security being one of the strengths of Peak 10. So how do you mitigate the risk associated with that?
Well, if you look at these things that you have on the slide right now, other than hardware failures and the power loss interruption, you're left with the bottom two: software install and accidental deletion. Those are all human-related. Security, prototypically, is human-related. Unfortunately, it's on the inside. With our services, we have all of the certifications from being HIPAA audited to PCI compliance to FDA audit compliance. That you can go on and on. ITAR, all those wonderful things. While they're challenging to get, once you have them secured in your cloud, which we do, that makes it convenient and comfortable for customers to be able to do this. And in addition to that, the Zerto solution provides an incredibly economic way for the most mundane DR person to say, I've checked the box, because once you're in the cloud, it makes it mindlessly simple to be able to push your DR solution into another provider who's offering this service. We found it to be fantastic.
Great. And then we look at recovery. So companies will recover, and in fact, in our survey, we found that more than 3/4 felt, yep, we will absolutely be able to recover. But then we get into what actual recovery is, and then the perception of recovery. So some customers felt like, oh, well, we can recover, fairly quickly. And then when they kind of dug down a little deeper, the fairly quickly was really a couple of days, which actually isn't that fast. And Kevin, I know you had some kind of interesting points around, what recovery really is and what people think it should be.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So for us, we've dropped almost to a degree the term DR as a service and just put it as recovery as a service, because as you showed on the previous slide, it's not just the traditional ideas of DR in terms of disasters, weather-related, etc. And being able to bring our customers a service that means they can recover from a whole range of unforeseen circumstances and events is what really helps allow them to have enterprise-grade service, regardless of effectively what their IT budget is almost.
Jen, did we lose you again?
Yes, sorry about that. Jordan, I was actually prompting you a little bit on, you had some good discussion around what recovery actually is versus what people think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to remember is that you got to look at everything on an application basis. It's not, hey, I'm going to recover my entire environment. I'm going to recover it in minutes. It's what is critical in your environment, which applications are the most critical, and making sure that you have a recovery kind of timeline of objective that's tested for those particular applications. There are some that just aren't as big of a deal. Some line of businesses app that kind of makes their job easier. Maybe that doesn't have to have a 1 hour RTO. But the thing that's running your business, that absolutely does. So it's really around just picking the apps, figuring out what a day of, I think your question at the bottom of the slide is accurate. What does more than 1 day of downtime, how does that affect your business on each of these applications?
Okay, great. So then when we take it a step further, so now we look at what is the downtime going to look like for those applications, how is it going to impact it, and then what are you going to lose if the application is down? So will you lose revenue, customers, or employee productivity? And then if the application is down, will you violate any laws or compliance regulations? Or if you have an agreement with the business to deliver a particular SLA, what is that going to look like? And then, Jeff, in particular, you had mentioned around FDA and HIPAA requirements about peak 10. So how do you help with this, help determine what applications require disaster recovery?
Sure, that's a great question. It's always individualized on the customer. As an example, we had a customer who, while they had thousands of customers themselves, they realized that their top 6 were the lion's share of their revenue. So all they had to do were recover the applications that could, in fact, support the top 6. That kept the spice flowing, so to speak, for them, so they kept the revenue stream coming in. And they tailored their DR objectives to really the business continuity of those 6 customers. And they knew that the other customers, if they could prevail a few more days until they could recover that economically it worked out so that the business would prevail. So at the end of the day, that's kind of the calculus you need to work to ensure that you're taking care of your business. If it's not mission critical, you don't need to be talking to any of this. If it is mission critical, you need to figure out a plan.
Great. And then, Jordan, you had talked a little bit about PCI and HIPAA as well in your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to really understand that, obviously, many of us on the panel here can't, do HIPAA and PCI and other compliance. But it's rarely the case of a, buy this product, click this box, check, you're done. Oftentimes, it really requires a conversation. And, there are people out there that kind of sell a one-click solution, and those are rarely kind of what they seem to be. So, in our experience, it's really important to understand what the application does, where its kind of potential holes are, and really just sit down with the solution architect and make sure that the solution that you're deploying is actually HIPAA compliant. But luckily, with modern encryption and a lot of things, it's actually pretty easy to get to either a PCI or HIPAA compliant solution.
Yeah, I guess from a UK perspective here at ADAPT, obviously we've got various EU regulations that we have to think around, EU Data Protection Act and things which is increasingly stringent and being revised this year. And our approach with the ADAPT Habitat is very much application focused. So we create 3 layers within our habitat, and we review those applications workloads along a whole range of criteria, including things like DR and security and performance and the operational aspects and commercials, to make sure that a customer is, not trying to fit effectively all of their requirements into one solution, but to actually align it very carefully to the application specifics.
Yeah, and then Dante. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dante, please.
Yeah, sorry, Jennifer, just jumping in there. Yeah, this is Dante. But yeah, we see the same thing. I mean, operating globally, we have to deal with all these, regulatory compliance requirements as well, and it's definitely interesting to see how, the EU is moving forward, right? And some things are definitely up in the air still. But one thing I did want to point out is a little bit different view of this. I know we're talking about applications, but I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but we are definitely seeing that a lot of organizations, particularly the procurement departments, are getting a lot more savvy with regards to contracts, not cloud contracts. I mean delivering service. So as many of us on this panel provide services to folks that are looking to deliver services to the overall market, we think in the last couple of years, due to some of the more documented outages that have happened out there, whether it's from human error, security reasons, even natural disaster, that procurement organizations are no longer saying, hey, do you have a disaster recovery plan if we're going to choose you as a vendor? That vendor could be anything, right? It could be the next SaaS provider that we're all working with, right? But we think that people are now asking for more in the way of an SLA. So usually there's a follow-on question that doesn't say, hey, can you tick the box for DR? That's not good enough anymore. So we're finding a lot of our customers are really, being forced to make sure that they have not only a DR plan, not only that it's documented, but that they have the ability to prove it to be able to continue to close business with some of the clients that they work with, whether they're mid-market, regulated clients, or even in the enterprise space. So I think that's another massive compelling argument on why we're seeing a lot of organizations quickly scrambling to make sure that not only they have a sound plan, but they have the ability to prove it, to be able to continue to address their customer segment and grow their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of our customers, the ones I talk to, so I put those big books there under regulations and things like that because they say that's what their DR plan looks like. And it's so heavy because of all their applications, because of all the things they need to prove out. So now that we've kind of talked about types of protecting applications and how you can maybe evaluate that a bit and things to consider internally and externally. So how can you achieve business continuity and disaster recovery? So there is, of course, private cloud BCDR. So that's where you would own both sites. You'd be responsible for management. You do the replication between them. A little that would require additional costs, of course, maybe matching environments. And then, of course, you can do disaster recovery as a service. So you can replicate from your site to one of our cloud provider partners. It's on a monthly basis. It's more like an operational cost model. Once you develop a great relationship with your cloud provider, as I'm sure that you will, everyone has those kind of cranky applications that they would love to just get rid of altogether. So you can give it to the cloud provider and let them do production and disaster recovery, and they can do that between their various locations. And then something that's new that we're kind of seeing is reverse disaster recovery as a service, because cloud providers want to always provide the shiny, brand new infrastructure with all the latest and greatest features. So that provides a benefit to a customer to be able to run their production workload within that environment. And then they can do disaster recovery back to their home site and extend the life of their assets that they have already purchased. And then something that we're just barely seeing a little bit here is DR between cloud providers. So the ability to do disaster, the application is managed by one cloud provider in terms of production, and then they do disaster recovery to a separate cloud provider. Kevin, when you were talking about the European Union sovereignty, and I know there are some location issues in terms of where data needs to reside. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we obviously see being focused on being a UK provider serving the UK market, but it's never just as simple as that. Obviously, when you're dealing with customers that are wider than the UK or trading outside of the UK as well, actually having considerations around where their data is held, who the people are that are accessing that data and managing that data is absolutely critical for them. So being able to give them the assurance and actually being able to allow them to physically come and audit and see their environments, where their DR infrastructure is, meet and greet the people, and have them all security cleared accordingly, he's a really important differentiator for us in the UK.
Great, and Dante, you had mentioned around location as well.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we think are kind of unique to the European market specifically also is that, Kevin, I don't know if you guys felt this, but a few years ago there was a public cloud company that decided that they were going to go out of business, and when they did, they were holding their customers hostage for their data, right? So that did not bode well for any European users of cloud services, right? So I think that we've seen a lot of organizations, particularly if they're in financial services, looking to adopt that multi-vendor type approach where they'll work with one vendor for a primary site, another vendor for the DR site to have diversity in the vendor base. And we're seeing some enterprise customers in the U.S. do the same. But again, here in the States, we don't deal with data sovereignty like we have to do in Europe and the rest of the world.
Great. Okay. So, I did want to do the poll question now. So, we've had some good discussion with our cloud service providers. We would like to know who you would like to hear from. Let's see. Okay. The poll is in progress. Let's see. And while we have one question that came in, so I'll take the question while we have the poll open. So they were actually asking about a specific Zerto capability. So do we allow replication between different kinds of hypervisors? And we will, actually, in April. So Zerto Virtual Replication 4.0 will be GA then, and we'll do replication between VMware and Microsoft Hyper-V environments. And I don't know if any of our panelists have been involved with the beta at all and want to say a few words while I pull this out for 20 more seconds on the poll.
Yeah, this is Dante. I've got a comment.
Go ahead, Dante.
Sorry, I think I stepped on somebody, guys. But one thing we're super excited about here, and Kevin, you may have some comments on this because we've seen it more in Europe and in Asia than we've seen it here in the States, but we're definitely seeing organizations are continuing to leverage VMware for their core applications, call it Tier 1. But some organizations are leveraging Hyper-V for Tier 2 and Tier 3, and we're definitely seeing those mixed environments. So having the ability to leverage one platform to be able to protect workloads on both hypervisors, replicate them to a hypervisor of choice, and be able to fail back to the primary site and maintain that application consistency across the whole board, we think is a massive, massive benefit for Zerto and what they're doing to help people like us address these mixed environments. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, for us, we have this the cloud integrator type strategy, and the version 4 release is really important because we, as an Amazon partner, as well as obviously a strong VMware partner, being able to use our cloud infrastructure, but also the customer's environment and other third parties, and bring all that together under one service environment. It's all about giving the customers the choice, but without feeling they're losing that control.
Okay, great. So I am going to close the poll. Thank you all for responding, and we will move on to the next question. So I think we did talk a little bit about this, but I did want to give Jordan the opportunity to add anything. So in terms of evaluating an application for DR, do you have a process that you go through, Jordan, to look at what application requires DR, what level of disaster recovery versus other options?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we start with is we start by sitting down with the customer and understanding business impact, and then it's some questions around data change rate. So how often is that data changing? That lets us get a realistic view on how much throughput is going to be needed to kind of connect the site. But really, what drives the conversation is the impact to the business. If it fails. What we do find, though, is you touched on the reverse disaster recovery. What we find is that that's a really common use case for these critical applications. It's that they fail them over to us in an environment where they need to do an upgrade or something like that. And then because the equipment that we're deploying, every day we're deploying the latest and most brand new servers and most powerful servers into our cloud environment. So the equipment that the critical production environment runs on tends to be better across a cloud provider than an enterprise. And because of that, they see performance increases. And then what they choose to do is leave it on the cloud provider and then fail back. And that way, what you end up with is that your most critical environment is running on the latest and greatest and fastest hardware. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of how that moves over.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, Jeff, I know that you have several locations within your cloud. Do you find that as well, that customers are kind of thinking like, oh, we'll do DR, and then like, ooh, maybe we want to put our production there?
Yeah, interestingly, we track how that works, and we have 14 years experience of this. I will tell you we hover right at the 90% threshold. And here's what I mean by that. When customers come to us, prototypically they always say, well, we want to start with you as our DR provider. And I will tell you, it's generally within 12 to 18 months, but after the 18-month period, 90% of them, if they start with us with DR, flip-flop, and we become their production provider. And what's cool about this solution is that we've had 2 instances where we have helped customers actually execute a move of their primary facility and use our recovery cloud, is what we call your product in our cloud system. We've used that recovery cloud to sustain them while they've executed the move of their actual office, and then they may queue their servers back up if they've started with us in just the DR solution, or if they've moved completely, we'll queue their systems back up to be the target for that. So that's been a fantastic boon for us. And you were asking earlier about how do we cipher through what the customer has to determine what's going to be appropriate, what's going to work incredibly well. I'll tell you the very basic tools that Zerto offers. The sizing tool has been fantastic. You want to make sure you have enough bandwidth. And a couple of slides ago you showed where you could go from cloud data center to cloud data center. In our environment, I mean, the smallest pipe we have is a 10 gig pipe. So when you're going from cloud to cloud, it's incredibly efficient and very easy. Literally a couple of button pushes, and we're executing the sync in that particular case. When it's going from the customer location into our cloud, we take a lot more care and hand-holding, if you will, to make sure everything is fine. And again, that pipe is extremely important at the beginning of that. And in some cases, we've used a cool technology called CTAM. CTAM is Chevy Truck Access Method. That's when you have to get the drives on a USB device or a USB drive to get the data into our cloud, because it's just multiple terabytes, so the customer is worried about it. And one of the other gentlemen mentioned number of transactions going on in databases. We ask all those questions just to make sure it's going to work flawlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great that you're able to do all that sizing up front so that when you do flip the switch, you'll be ready for it. So when we're having conversations earlier in the week around how do you know if your DR strategy is good enough, the solution you have in place, I know that all our panelists are like, I have a lot of great stories to talk about this. So Dante, we'll start with you in terms of how do you give confidence to your customers?
Well, I think one of the massive differentiators for Zerto, is the ability to actually not just automate and orchestrate the recovery of the environment, but having the ability to actually generate a report that details out every step that was taken to recover the infrastructure. And when we speak to sysadmins and IT leaders, this one feature is huge for them, right? Because we all know that folks that are in IT are really the ones that are looking to collaborate as best they can with a cloud provider, because at the end of the day, if there's a challenge with the infrastructure, all eyes are on them to recover it, right? And that's just talking about the immediate need to be able to restore availability so that the business can continue, let alone the impact that can come after, So having the ability to not only automate these tasks, but to prove it and do it very quickly by exporting a report, I think is a huge, huge differentiator for Zerto, and it's one of the reasons why so many customers enjoy this platform, regardless of who the cloud provider is that they're working with.
Yeah, and I guess we see, I guess, as well, what I would now term provable DR. So it's one thing having DR, but if it's not proven, you may as well not have it. So actually proving that and being able to whether that's simulate or whether that's actually failing over. And our first experience a lot of our customers get of this is quite often when we migrate them in the first place to bring them into a wider managed service, and seeing that and being able to simulate a migration, test it all first, gives them great confidence that when they're in a live environment that we've got their DR needs covered and that we can prove it.
Yeah, and Jordan, I know you had some good things. Oh, please, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please.
Yeah, no worries. No, I think it really comes down to the way you look at the DR. I hate, I almost, Zerto makes it so easy that I almost hate to call it DR, because DR has this connotation of, okay, when a disaster hits, I'm gonna hit the switch and cross my fingers, because that's really not how it is anymore. It really gets to a point where you think about the application differently. In the same way that nobody ever worries about turning off a DNS server because they know that there's 3 others that are running it, you start to kind of think of the same thing, and you start to say, okay, we've got a really severe thunderstorm coming through next week. Maybe I'll transfer load over to an Arcade Single Hop and let them run our production website because it's a holiday season. And so rather than even take a risk about a power outage in our on-prem or anything like that, we're just going to go ahead and make the transition at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, and we're going to hit the button and it's going to move over. And as you start to move workloads based on kind of the right timing and being cautious about things, as you start to move that frequently, you stop thinking about it as, okay, I've got to make sure if my DR is going to work, and you start to think of it as, oh, okay, it's just just another. I've done this 6 times this year so far. I'm just going to move it back, and it really just changes the mindset in the conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like in a really good way, though. Jeff, do you see similar things in your environment, like how it's able to make things people thought was so hard, as Jordan said, and it's easy, and people are like, this looks interesting.
Yeah, we say if it was easy, we'd hire good-looking people, but they hire people like me. It's kind of weird. I will tell you that we provoke our clientele base on this, and we have a plethora of clients. This is a fantastic product for us. We provoke them to do 2 DR tests a year. We try and get it scheduled so that they have plenty of people to watch and make sure everything works right, from DNS to sequencing of servers, so on and so forth. And it just helps vet out the solution. And what's kind of nice is after that first one, where their hair's on the fire a little bit, especially if it's a big complex environment with 150 servers in it, perhaps it's kind of fun to see how well it works, and then to see how rapidly the systems function, and they're happy with the compute on our side, and certainly the I/O. It's always a wonderful experience when you get to have the Miller time, if you will, at the end of that, to see that it worked. There are always lessons learned because their environment's always growing, and by that same token, we tell the customer up front that we're going to update the environment probably 4 times a year. We will go through a series of upgrades, whether it's Zerto related or hypervisor or whatever. There are typically 4 significant upgrades a year, and we want to work with them to make sure that on their side they're staying in concert with us. So those are all very important things. This is not a hands-off service. This is something that you need to keep great attention on, because you want to keep things in sync and make sure that it's operating flawlessly.
Yeah, great. And actually a question came in very relevant to this discussion. So, and we'll go kind of backwards through the way that people comment on the slide. So Jeff, starting with you, someone was wondering, so not related to the Zerto project itself, when is the DR operation viewed as complete? Is it when the failed production component has been successfully failed over, or does it end when it's been repaired, rebuilt, and end users are able to hit it? What's
that is the test. As long as you're, we call it the customer experience. So the end user might be the customer of our customer. When it is working as desired for them, then that is a complete solution. It's difficult in a normal test to do that unless you've quiesced your primary site to push traffic into that. But that is typically what you want to see as a test. We can build solutions so that we can leverage a test against that to ensure that it's going to happen. That's a great question, and that gets answered individually for each customer because they are all different.
Yeah, Jordan, how about for you?
Yeah, you know, this is that's kind of the million-dollar question, right? The fact is that now with Zerto, we can move your data over. You know, the slide, you know, the name of this webinar was in 60 minutes, and that's actually pretty accurate. We can start your data getting moved over. We can get the VMs on. It can be fairly running. It's the application is, you know, that's 80% of the work right there, and that's why it's, you know, it's really important that everybody understands that, you know, the application is the most important thing. We're going to spend most of the time talking about your application, testing your application. The data itself and the actual VM moving over itself is actually, you know, now it always used to be really challenging, but nowadays it's kind of just assumed it works, and it takes no time at all.
Great. And Kevin, you had mentioned in particular provable DR. So what's the proof point? Is it's up or end user?
I mean, proof is when the service, you've got to remember, this is what it's all about. You know, DR is not just about having infrastructure up and spinning again. It's about whatever that service is that infrastructure is supporting is back up. You know, and that could be internal users, really proper end customer users, or any other element of the service. So it really is, you can only consider it a, you know, a success and it recovered when that service has been recovered to not only the level that's agreed contractually, but also where whatever the cause effectively of that incident has been reviewed and mitigated and recovered accordingly.
And how about for you, Dante?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the areas that's often overlooked is end user access, right? So, you know, being able to restore the application, step one, but, you know, good design, you know, it might have been Jordan that mentioned this. I mean, 80% of the work is done in advance, right? Making sure that not only can we automate the recovery of the application, but making sure that we've designed the network in such a way that end users can access the environment. And that's one area where we just typically see a lot of folks don't think that one through as their first step. But again, you know, we see various different types of customers, right? I think one of the growing trends we're seeing is customers that have actually invested in DR, right? That have been doing this themselves for one reason or another, and they look at the challenges that they have to continue to maintain their existing process. And clearly that existing process is usually flawed. There's usually a lot of mind share in very few people. So imagine, you know, at the rate at which things change in IT today, you know, so having something like Zerto that allows you to automate this is key. But when we work with folks that have already been through the process, then clearly they understand the need for end user access. But I'd say the vast majority of folks that are looking at disaster recovery for the first time really don't have a strong plan, and this is one of the things that they often overlook. So clearly everybody on this line understands those challenges, and obviously we have to work with customers up front to make sure that we hit those details so they are pleased when they go through the testing process.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I'm glad that we got that question because that shows, you know, kind of the maturity in thinking around disaster recovery. It's like, well, it's over there. You know, getting the data to the second site is, yeah, that's part of it, and it's there, but that doesn't complete the process. So that's great. So making investment in disaster recovery as a service, so can be so how can you maximize your DRaaS investment? So you have the second site. Are there other ways that you can use it? And there are many other ways that you could leverage this site working with the cloud provider partners. And Dante, you kind of positioned it as an extension of the data center when we spoke.
Yep, that's right. So I think one of the advantages here is that giving customers the ability to have complete control over this recovery, you know, being able to initiate that recovery on their own, it was great, but we also see that folks are looking to justify these investments and look at ways that they can actually leverage that cloud capacity day in and day out for whatever purpose. So depending on what we're trying to mitigate against and what someone's tolerance is for performance and downtime and things of that nature, we see some folks that want to have 100% of the capacity it takes to run steady state in their existing environment live at all times in the DR site. So if you have complete control over that secondary site, why not leverage that existing capacity for anything, whether it's development, testing, doing some actual updates of your local infrastructure, right? The idea is looking at that as a complete extension of your existing capacity is a growing trend that we see today, which is kind of converse to a lot of folks that have done these things historically, right? They may look at DR as, I want this to be as cheap as possible, and I'm not too concerned about actually leveraging this infrastructure. So clearly, if your organization is growing, this can provide that added cushion as you're looking to continue to scale your existing footprint.
And Jeff, especially as you have the environment that's able to meet some compliance requirements, do you find that your customers have found new and creative ways to kind of leverage their DRaaS service?
Sometimes. Let me just tell a bad story because the service works so well. I've had 2 customers now where a junior engineer has deleted a file on their production side and thought, oh, well, I'll just slip over here to P10 and grab the file back from the DR side in both these cases, only to realize that, oh my God, this is actually mirroring my production environment. So it was humorous for a moment because they couldn't get that file back because they had deleted it, and of course that got replicated to delete on the recovery side, and that's how well the service works. When your IT people can actually look at it and go, oh my God, I know I can go over there and see the same thing, that's awesome. However, it doesn't work that way. It works just as designed, and it is not data recovery just yet. I see that coming. I see that as a tremendous capability in the future, but the product is not set up for it just yet. So with respect to the compliance issues, we haven't seen any panacea solution just yet, but it certainly helps them knowing that they're going into a already HIPAA audited cloud or something like that. It gives them peace of mind, and again, enables them to check the box, and their auditors to also check the box and say, yeah, this works.
Yeah, and Kevin, with the European Union, I know that us being a U.S.-based company, when we've been interacting with Europe, we even find interesting, regulations that we have to follow in terms of data privacy and things like that. So based on you having a carefully configured infrastructure to satisfy EU requirements, have your customers come up with any creative ways to really maximize DRaaS?
Yeah, we've seen customers now using it, as per on the slide there, for development and into testing and up into production, also for third site type copies as well of data, so using traditional storage replication for their primary and secondary, but then also having third copies and then being able to take those off for other means and other use cases that the business has. So Zerto as itself as a tool that we use across the business is not really confined to effectively traditional DR. There's also a lot of other use cases that we're using, including the portability between cloud providers, but also portability for different use cases of the same data.
Yeah, and actually kind of related to this topic, so a question came in, Jordan, I'm going to pose to you. So someone said, I just heard that moving data takes no time at all. Could one of the panelists share how they're able to move terabytes or petabytes of data? And, of course, that makes it more useful getting it there faster. So, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first sync is always, the longest. One of the other panelists joked about the Chevy truck method, and that's actually by far the fastest way. We've definitely, I'm not going to name names, but we've definitely backed up from other cloud providers and found that their IOPS were not necessarily able to handle the transfers. And so we did exactly that. We synced it to a USB drive. We overnighted it to us. We plugged it in, and then the important part is the change rate. And the change rates on most enterprise environments are just almost laughably small. There's not that much data that gets synced every minute. And that's why we were talking about the fact that the environments are basically mirrored. That you're able to mirror them because only the changes are actually the things that are moving over, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. I'm going to move on just because in the interest of time. So this was kind of interesting. So what does your cloud provider know that you don't? And Jeff, you mentioned a couple instances that you were able to kind of inform your customers of what was going on in their environment.
Sure. The tool enables you to have some visibility, even though you may not have a direct path to monitor the customer's environment. You know, I just think of 4 examples right at the top of my head where a customer had a host down at their site, and we see that because you know, Zerto is telling us that it can't get a particular host synced, and it's pretty easy to go back to them and say, hey, what's going on? What's interesting is when we called them in this first particular instance, they were already on the phone with both Dell and VMware support trying to figure out what was going on, and they were blown away that we called them proactively to say, hey, we see something going on. I mean, another instance was where a customer was experiencing a SAN issue, but their SAN was not articulating the issue to them. Monitoring was not set up properly to do that, and we just saw that performance was being retarded and being able to update the VPGs, and so we, again, contacted that customer, and I'll tell you what, when you do that, the customers first, you know, they might be taken aback for a second, but immediately they know you're their best friend in that crisis, so it always turns out to be a positive thing, because you're only calling to try and help them. And, you know, if their vCenter is down, that's another instance where we call them up and it's not communicating with ZVM, so we call them up and say, hey, we see some sort of issue, and they go, well, let me log into vCenter and I'll see what I can see. And when they can't, it's like, oh, crap, and they have to bounce their vCenter. So those are great examples that we've seen, and again, it makes you seem like a superhero to that customer, but you're just articulating what you're seeing on your own screen. So it works out great. The customers tend to love that, and you know, it gives us an ability to help them.
Yeah, great. And Dante, when you and I were talking, you were kind of talking about the failover process itself, and that the application is available a little sooner than when things are completely built, and you talked about that as, you know, we're able to see things into the future. You want to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we've been super excited about is by leveraging, you know, the REST API and being able to actually integrate Zerto services directly into our portal, we're able to index all the actions and provide a lot of data to the end customer about the process, and, you know, set subsequent alerts on that. And the piece that we discussed that I think is absolutely unique to Zerto is you know, how you have such an immediate opportunity to access the workload, even while it's being restored from the journal. And this is just something we haven't seen. I mean, we've worked with so many different technologies for the last 9 years to recover environments, right? Spanning the whole gamut of, you know, array-based replication, agent-based replication, right? All the way into things that are hypervisor aware, like Zerto, and nobody's been able to do this. So I think having not only the visibility to be able to set alarms on these things, but also to know that you can quickly access this environment while it's being restored is absolutely unique to Zerto.
Yeah, great. So thanks for sharing that, Dante, because that does give a lot more perspective. So I am going to move a little quickly through the slides, and because we do have questions, many questions actually from the audience. So I will maybe present that later. I'm going to move through this real quickly. This is kind of the vision of Zerto moving forward. So you have applications in your private cloud with service providers, etc. And the Cloud Continuity Fabric from Zerto is going to be the glue that enables you to encapsulate your application and move it anywhere you need to move it based on the SLA and the price. And then this is what I wanted to make sure we get up while we took questions. So if you do have any questions that we don't get today, feel free to contact any of our panelists. And let me start with Fast and Furious, many, many questions. So Jordan, we'll start with you. Someone is asking if the panelists could share pricing models. So whatever you're comfortable sharing, Jordan, on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're pretty open with how things work. It's pretty simple. There's 2 components to DR. There is the licensing component, which is done on a per VM basis, and it's not much. And the second component is the environment that you're backing up to. At SingleHop, we have 3 different options based on kind of what you're doing with that. So we have our what we call our dedicated private clouds, which is what a lot of our customers choose. It's a completely isolated private cloud. We have a virtual private cloud, which is built kind of in a reservation, so it's very similar. All the resources are 100% dedicated to you, but it's in a shared pool of resources. And then we can put you in a shared pool with shared resources. So again, it all depends on the application. We have customers that have non-critical applications that go to shared resources, shared pool, and we have customers with mission-critical applications that we build in a complete dedicated private cloud for, and it's in their own rack. It's built for themselves, it's kept up to date for them. So obviously, pricing goes up as you get more isolated, and goes down as you get more shared.
Okay, great. How about for you, Kevin?
Yeah, I guess pretty similar, to Jordan in terms of offering those options, the per VM and the volume of storage and the type of infrastructure you're going to put it on as to whether it's shared or otherwise. I guess one thing we've started to see and start to have some discussions recently with a few prospects is around doing almost a price to recover. So trying to keep the price really low on the customers up front and their OPEX, and actually then giving them the option to actually have a bigger hit if and when they actually needed to do a recovery. Because most customers are taking it as an insurance policy they hope they'll never need. So actually we had to start to have a few customers that are interested in that type of model as well.
Okay, great. Jeff, over to you on pricing.
Sure. All of our platform is based on the Cisco UCS architecture. Let me just tell everybody that so they know the reference point here. And we tuned the disk to use the waffle architecture. So if you understand what you're doing, you're taking something that's targeted it's outside your environment, and you're targeting it to journal it inside. So that is massively write oriented. So we tune the disk to accommodate that. And the pricing, basically, we do it in a very simple fashion. We do on a per VM basis, again, keeping it simple, and then predicated on how much storage you require with those VMs. So very simple, 2 components, per VM storage, or per VM rather, and then a storage component.
Last but not least, Dante.
You're going to love this. How about all the above? There's not much less to talk about in the way of pricing at this point, right? I mean, I think what you're going to find is that cloud providers have been working with the technology for years now, right? And a lot of us have developed really great processes around how to go through a pre-sales process with a customer, really make sure we understand their application needs, and then have the flexibility to provide the right solution at the back end of that. And to everyone's point, you're going to deal with all sorts of different requirements. And I think what differs amongst the the Zerto cloud community and maybe some other public cloud environments is that I think we've built our organizations on being able to meet customer requirements, and that means we have to be flexible, right? So it'd be great to say, hey, we've got an offer that's super simple and we don't deviate, because I think all of us have to deviate to make sure that we can address all the requirements. Contrary to the global marketing around disaster recovery, it's super simple. Well, yes, Zerto makes it so much simpler, but it still requires sound design by both teams, the provider as well as the IT leaders we work with.
Yeah. Okay. So Dante, I'll give you the opportunity to be original, and this is, and I think it's the question, essentially the question we skipped. So someone's asking, how would you provide DR from IVM server? So essentially, how do we get started?
Yep, great. So, from our perspective, we'd love to have a conversation, right? I mean, really, we want to understand exactly what your applications look like, understand, what the requirements are from an RTO, RPO perspective, and really start to dig into the details, right, around the network, and making sure that we can walk you through a design process. So at the end of the day, not only do we understand what these costs would look like, but you'll have a much better understanding of, how to recover the infrastructure and what somebody like iland can bring to bear.
Okay. Jordan, does that differ for you at all?
No, not really. It's a pretty simple thing nowadays. It's gotten a lot easier. It used to be a much bigger conversation around storage architectures and types and everything, and now it's a pretty simple conversation.
Okay. All right. So Kevin, to you, what are the best practices for client access to the DR site?
So I guess, our side, it's really, you're not. It's a cloud, it's a DR environment, but customers need the confidence, because at the end of the day, DR is about having that insurance policy and the confidence it's going to work. So one thing is a provable DR, but another is giving them the facility to actually come and audit it, come and have a look. And whilst you're not going to let them start pulling wires around and physically touching the equipment, we do have a lot of customers as part of that contractual phase, or even regularly as part of their own compliance, actually come and audit and actually come and want to see it and come and see the facility, check out the security, the controls around it, and things in that nature. And that's something encourage our customers to do, so that they have got that confidence.
Jeff, do you do something similar at Pink 10?
Yeah, kind of. I get to be the all of the above guy this time. Certainly, we probably do 2 audits a week across our fleet. I think we're Cisco's largest DR provider in the UCS environment. We're their DR as a service provider of the year last year. And Zerto, good Lord. I know I write the check to you every month, so I know we're doing well there, and that continues to grow. So it is a fantastic product. It's well architected, and I will tell you, your roadmap for the future is fantastic. So, it's easy to help with the customer. It's always a consultative sale on the front end, because we want to make sure we're meeting all the needs that they have, because if we do that, we know they'll be a customer long term. And so that's what it boils down to.
Okay, great. I'm going to switch modes to go to a different question, because we are almost at the top of the hour. This will probably be the last one. So, Jordan, as Active Directory is most of the times the essential for environments, and seeing as Microsoft is rather strict on how to protect Active Directory, how are you handling and solving that issue? Very technical question.
Absolutely. So, all the sales guys in the room and my company roll their eyes when we answer this question. But the truth is that we're going to be the first ones to tell you what's better protected with other technologies. There are some applications that are phenomenal at running active-active. And by all means, we're the first ones to suggest that you run those active-active. I would most likely tell you that to kind of bypass, a DR, more of a traditional DR strategy, and run an active-active. Active Directory Federation Services, Office 365. There's all kinds of absolutely wonderful technologies for protecting Active Directory. A standby site isn't probably the best. It's something you can definitely do, but it's definitely easier to use a better, to use the active-active technology they have today.
Okay, great. And that is going to be our last question, since we are right at 1 minute past the full hour. So thank you all for staying on with us for the duration of the webinar. I hope you got some great information. Jordan, Kevin, Dante, and Jeff, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. And everyone, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, everybody.